Okay, well, hello everybody and welcome to the panel with Poltergeist with Oliver Robbins. We're going to do, obviously, we're going to talk about the film and what you're up to, and then afterwards there'll be a chance for you to ask questions if you like. Okay? And obviously my first question to you would be, how did you get the part?
Well, you know, it's funny, I had very little experience acting before I did it. And I told my parents I wanted to be an actor, so they put me in this class, a commercial workshop class, where I went out for auditions for commercials. And it turned out there was an open call for this really big studio movie called Poltergeist. They didn't know anything about it. And an open call is where anyone from the public can come and audition for it. So outside the studio called Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, I stood outside on line with hundreds of other people, and I got my chance, and they interviewed me, and they asked me a couple questions, and I really didn't think much of it too. I get a call back, and they said, we want to have you come back for another meeting. And I'm like, I'm thinking about it, and I find out later they were interested because they asked me a key question. They said, Oliver, what are you afraid of? And I didn't know anything about the movie or the script. That was like top secret. I said, I'm afraid of trees, I'm afraid of clown dolls. I basically was afraid of everything my characters are afraid of. But, you know, when you're looking for child actors, you're really looking for someone who's like the part, because you're not really trained, you have no classical training. You just want a kid who's comfortable and on camera, and you can basically, you know, just be yourself. And that's what I was. So I auditioned for it, and I did a really good reading. I'm like, that was really good. But my problem was, I didn't know how to scream. And Tobe Hooper said, you know, Oliver, the secret to horror is someone who knows how to scream. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to get this part because I can't scream. So believe it or not, there's people in Los Angeles that specialize in teaching you how to scream. So I met with this coach, and they helped me learn how to scream. And I screamed, and I belted it out, and they're like, yeah, you have the part. And I was completely amazed, because I had already seen like Jaws and Close Encounter of the Third Kind, and I was like, God, I'm gonna get to work with like, I didn't see Texas Chainsaw, my parents won't let me see that, but I saw the other movies, and I'm gonna get to work with Steven Spielberg too. It was kind of it was completely amazing. So that's how I ended up getting the part.
And obviously you were quite young when you filmed the first one. How did you keep yourself grounded? You know, obviously it was quite a spooky film.
Well, you know, the thing is, when you make a movie, it's over a period of, you know, a studio film, probably 5 to 9 months. I mean, it goes on for an extended period of time. And they shoot a film completely out of order. So you have really relying upon the director and the producer to kind of guide you along and say, this is what we're doing in this scene, this is where it belongs in the story. And you're being guided, and you have to also understand, you know, how am I supposed to be afraid? What level of fear do I have, and what am I afraid of? So it's really technical in terms of, like, you know, what you're really doing. You have no idea where you are in terms of the story. It's only after the movie's really put together that it's scary and all the special effects are put in. I mean, there were like scenes where they didn't even know what the ghost looks like, and we were looking at blank walls out there. They had like sticks there saying, "This is your island. You're looking over here." And I asked Tobe. I said, "Tobe, what am I screaming at?" And he said, "We don't know yet, but it's the scariest thing you can possibly think of." So that's what we were screaming at. So when the ghosts are in the background, or a lot of the effects that Island put in, we had no idea until after we really saw the film what they were going to be like.
And obviously the next question to that would be, did you ever feel spooked yourself? Was there ever a time when you were filming that you did feel quite scared?
Well, not on that set, but you know, before that, I was, and relative to America, I lived in a really old building. And for America, this was old. It was built like in the 1860s, which in New York City, that's old. It was like built right after our Civil War. And I swear it was haunted. And I found out later that this building was literally a whorehouse right after the war in New York City. And there was one room in this house that was never changed. It had these red velvet walls. I guess all the owners had never changed this. And I confessed to my mom years later. I said, "You know that room in our house that had the velvet walls?" She said, "Yeah, that I felt chills in that." And my father, who doesn't even believe in ghosts at all, was like, you know, stone cold about everything. He felt weird things. So I always tapped into that. I always thought about this scary room and the staircase in this townhouse in Manhattan. And that, for me, was my true fear. But in terms of the set, there was really nothing that really went on. I mean, we got the flu, and Steven Spielberg's mom made his chicken noodle soup. I mean, like, you had 100 people who were sick of all eating chicken noodle soup. You know.
Can you tell me a bit more about the glam scene in the film? Because I've heard you got quite injured.
You know, I was told I almost died during the shooting of this, and I have no recollection of that whatsoever. But I'm told, my mom even said, yeah, you almost got strangled with a clown doll. And I guess Steven jumped in there and pulled the clown doll off me. And that was, it was a pretty technical scene too, of how we shot it. There was no CGI or anything done. It was all practical effect. And the way that was shot is they used a reverse camera. They wound the film backwards, so I had to actually act backwards. So I started the pinnacle of fear, and then I went down to a normal, level of, monotone, level of fear, I guess. So I started big, and then I went small, and I pulled the arm away from me. So when the film was played forward, it looked like the arm was going around me. So it was always, on that set as a kid, it was really fun. They always said there was always some new challenge. And today, Oliver, you're going to have to act backwards. That's the challenge today. And each of those little pieces of the scene, they, look seamless, but each is a little moment. When I look under the bed, and then he has me under the bed, and the way they cut it together, it looks brilliant.
And would you say that was your worst scene to film? I mean, you can't recall it, but I just wondered what your worst scene for the film to do was.
Well, my worst scene was also my best scene, I think, too. I think the tree scene was the most difficult scene for me to shoot, and I had fun doing it, but it was first I had this stunt coordinator, Glenn Randall, I remember. He was a great guy. He was a stunt coordinator on a movie called Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was my favorite film after I saw it. It's a whole different story of how I saw that film on Poltergeist. And he said, okay, this is what we're going to do for this scene. We're going to have these large arms of the tree. They're going to come out. And we're going to shoot sugar glass at you. Don't worry, the sugar glass doesn't hurt. You just have to make sure your eyes are covered. So I covered my eyes and my face and said, after the sugar glass is gone, then we're going to have the big arms of the tree come on. And be careful of the little branches. And we want you to look as if you're trying to get away from the tree, but at the same time we want you to hop on top of it. And it's going to pull you out through part of the soundstage. To that makeshift window. Because that window, that whole set, was built at MGM on the soundstage. And then they had 5 other kinds of trees. One that looked tall to make it look, dramatic. Another one that they had just the mouth of the tree where you had to simulate, maybe an eat. All along, I was covered in molasses. And I don't know if you've ever covered your body from head to toe in molasses. I don't recommend it. Your body temperature actually drops. And I was like, can I get warm? They're like, no, you can't wash off the molasses because we need you. I mean, you can wash off maybe at lunch. So they got one of the big floodlights just to keep me warm because my body temperature was actually physically dropping because of the molasses too. So it was, and this went on for pretty much 2 weeks. So I was like, oh, when is this thing gonna end? And I loved it because it looked great. But I would say for a kid, for me at that time, it was probably the most challenging scene.
And did you say that was your favourite scene for the film as well?
I think so too. I mean, I think I looked the most afraid, and it's the most, it's really creative. I mean, it really taps into our childhood fear. So for me, that was, I think, the quintessential childhood fear, nightmare kind of moment.
And obviously you did the second one as well. Were you happy about doing the second film?
It was, that was a little different. I mean, we didn't have Steven on board anymore, or Tobe too, but I had the original cast, and it was great to come back together, and we were really a family. The director was a little more technical too, and he didn't have the same sense as Tobe or Steven, and they didn't give me as much freedom, in terms of what to do. And what I really loved about the original Poltergeist is that a lot of those scenes you watch, the reason why they seem so natural is I was able just to add little lines. They said to me, Tobe was like, you're in the kitchen, you're with your sister, be a kid, do what you're going to do, make up your lines, And meanwhile, we had to hit certain story points and certain pieces of dialogue, but everything in between we could do that. On Poltergeist 2, it was much more by the numbers. And I feel like my performance in that wasn't as probably fluid or natural because we did that, And I think, the trick when you become a professional actor as an adult, you make it your own, you make it feel natural, even when you're doing it by the numbers. And I really had 0 training at all. I mean, I just did this because I just had fun acting and I liked being someone else. But I wasn't really able to make the scene very natural, I felt like. So I wasn't as happy, I think, with my performance in that, the second one.
And did you, like you have said already, did you all get on really well on set?
Oh, we did. I really credit the dynamic between all of us on that set. The reason why that film plays so well, because we really were a family on that. And honestly, when I did Poltergeist, I had almost no acting experience whatsoever. I was incredibly nervous. I didn't even know what I was going to do. And he told me, everyone reassured me that I was going to be great. And they said, just be you, Oliver. And that's all we want you to, just be you. And, you know, Tobe, she was so fantastic. She was my mom on that set to me, you know. She was completely my mother every day. I said, Joe, what do I do? And she's, okay, this is what we're going to do, Oliver. We're going to run in this space right here, and you're going to be completely nervous. And we used to talk about the scene, and even in Poltergeist 2, some of the lines, I was like, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what the scene means. So Joe Beth would do an improv with me, and she would talk about the scene with me, and I said, okay, I get it. So it felt very real from the heart, because you know the camera really never lies. It's almost like a lie detector. It can sense what you're feeling, even in your eyes. So Joe Beth was just, you know, fantastic. She was my mom in many ways.
Poltergeist was the original ghost movie. I mean, it just was where it all started. How do you think it compares to films of today, like Paranormal Activity?
Well, this is what I think, and I think this is a symptom of filmmaking in general today. I think people don't trust audiences. They don't trust they're smart enough to really have a film move slow or a slow burn. Films have to jump into the story within 10 minutes. And Poltergeist is really interesting because if you watch the movie, the first 30 minutes of the movie, really, very little really happens other than the fact that we're really getting to know the audience. We're getting to know the family. And that's important because if you root for the audience, you root for these characters, and you love them, when you put them into jeopardy, you're going to be rooting for them to survive. And I think in movies today, they're going for the jump scares very fast. And, you know, you're going for the special effects. And, you know, when I did Poltergeist, I started making films myself. And Spielberg told me a very important thing. He said, you know, Oliver, compassion will always win over camera. And the way I interpreted that is the fact is you can have all the amazing special effects in the world, but if you don't care about your characters, you don't love them or root for them or at least understand them, you're going to have a movie that's going to really fall flat. And I feel a lot of films today, especially the horror movies, they don't play like Poltergeist. And I don't know if those films are really going to hold up like 40, 50 years from now. And I think that's one of the reasons why Poltergeist is still beloved after all these years, because everyone can relate to the family in that movie. And the special effects, you know, are weak in many ways compared to special effects today. And it almost doesn't matter. People don't really care because at the end of the day, what you care about are the characters and the relationships. And I think that's really lacking in cinema today, you know.
I mean, one of my favourite scenes that I recall from the film is when you get wrapped up in your braces in the bathroom. Was that all special effects, or was there anything you had to specifically do for that?
Well, the origin of that scene, originally they were going to have me attacked by bees instead of the braces. And it turned out I was allergic to bees. And I said, there's no way I'm going to have bees attack me. Because they wanted to use real bees. They actually physically wanted to have my entire body covered in bees. And they said, Oliver, it's okay because there's such a thing as trained bees. They said, when you give a command, the bees will hop off you. And you know, I was like 14 years old, so a precocious 14-year-old, and I said, no way, there's no such thing as a trained bee. So they said, okay, we're going to rewrite it. And then they came up with the idea for the braces. And for that, it was a challenge because I was like completely claustrophobic to begin with. And the way they had to do it, they didn't have CGI. They had to take a mold of my face. And they said, this is how we're going to do this. We're going to trim the plaster over your face. We're going to give you straws all over. You can breathe out of your nose for 30 minutes while we make this mold. So I was completely terrified, but we had to do it that way. And then what they did is they did almost like a claymation. They animated the braces coming out of my mouth. And they did it in various shots, too. And, you know, there was a lot of acting involved with that because they bolted me to, like, the ceiling. And they said, okay, this is the level the braces are coming out. You're terrified. And I had different levels of terror during that sequence. So there was kind of a progression of fear going on in that scene.
Did you get to keep any of the props on set?
No, well, I didn't get any of the props, but however, at the wrap break, Poltergeist, I got this wrap gift from Steven. And Steven says, here it is, and I open it. It's the slate from Poltergeist. So he gave me one of the 4 slates from the movie, too. And he also gave me a Super 8 camera, which I started making films. And then I went to film school, and I used the very same camera that Steven gave me to shoot my very first movies.
That brings me on to, obviously, since Poltergeist, you've written, directed, and produced around 50 films.
I don't think that. I wish. No, I've done like shorts, and I've done.
Yeah.
I think I've done like directed 5 features, and I wrote a Hallmark Channel movie that was on TV here several years ago. I think the original name in the U.S. was called "You Got a Friend," and here I think it was called Derby. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's about this little boy who builds a soapbox racers befriended by the town outcast. And like soapbox racers are basically like gravity racers. You get kids that in like yesteryear would like roll down the hill in these cars, and the film takes place in like right after the Vietnam War in like the mid-early 70s, and John Schneider was the lead. And I think it was on TV here. I saw it once on the internet. I was like, oh, it's playing here in England.
And how did you get into all that from acting? What made you decide to go into directing and producing?
Well, it all started with Poltergeist. I just fell in love with the whole process. I said, I want to tell my own stories. And Spielberg gave me a super 8 camera, and I started making films, and I showed him my movies, and he said, this is how you do this effect, and you wind back the film. And the camera he gave me this very fancy Super 8 camera. This is before video, so if you wanted to make films, you had to shoot on film. So he taught me all these little techniques, and then I just started making films of my own. I had my friends over in the neighborhood, and I almost burned down my parents' house doing pyrotechnics in it, and they forgave me for that, which was nice. And then I told Spielberg, I was like, I'd love to make movies for my life, but let me do it professionally. He says, you know what? Go to USC Film School. That's where I want you to go. So I applied to the film school at the university, and I got rejected. And I'm like, how can they reject me? I got a letter of recommendation from Steven Spielberg. So the film school tells me, he says, you know what? We won't be told what to do by anyone, including Mr. Spielberg. So it was really great. I showed one of my movies. This is one thing lesson I learned. You never take no for an answer in the entertainment industry. It starts in the film school at USC. So I said, you have to let me in. They said, no, we're not letting you in. So I managed to make an appointment with the dean of the film school. I said, look at my movie, you can make your decision. And he overrode the admission committee after I showed him my movie. And that's how I got into making films. I learned at the film school, and it was a great experience. And they teach you there everything technical, how to make a film. But there's nothing that compares. Nothing compares to actually just going out and just making your movies and working with your friends. And I still work with my buddies from the film school at USC even today.
What was your favourite one that you did? Your favourite film that you directed?
I like, it's funny, I've directed like everything from romantic comedies to sex comedies. And I just like my Hallmark movie. I really like the way, I didn't direct it, but I wrote it. And I like it because it's the kind of thing I can watch with my grandma. It's like everything else is a little more adult or R-rated. And this is just it's a sweet movie, and it's a really positive message. And they ended up using this movie as a lesson plan for schools, what it is to be a hero. And I didn't even know it was going to be used like that. So it feels really good in a movie that has that kind of positive message,
And is that what you're doing now? What have you got going on at the moment?
I just co-wrote a movie called Devil's Whisper, which I know is going to be released eventually in the UK. It's at Walmart now in the United States. And it's an interesting movie. It's about this kid who's 16 years old, and he's an aspiring priest, and this demonic force comes after him for some reason, which we don't even know why. It's an ancient demon. And we find out, is it truly, a true possession, or is it something that's gone on in his past? And we find out he has various problems from his childhood that are kind of rearing their head. So it's kind of in many ways, it's a drama masquerading as a horror movie. And people seem to like it. And we worked very hard. I wrote with my other friend from USC, and we worked very hard on the script. And I think it's paying off because it has an impact, and people are feeling it.
Is there any part that you've played previously in a film that you've looked back and regretted wish you hadn't done?
No, I was happy to get any part I could get growing up. I loved everything I did, And it was fun. I got, my mom was very protective of me. And she knew I was very sensitive to certain things. In certain parts, in big movies, she didn't want to let me do. She was like, I'll give all of her nightmares. So everything I did do as a kid was great. And I worked with some great people, too. I got the opportunity to work with everyone from Ruth Gordon, she was fantastic, to Ralph Bellamy. And he won an Academy Award, I think, for FDR film, Springtime Count Bella. So I had all these amazing opportunities to work with these fine actors, and they taught me so much of and it's not just your performance on a set, it's how you act on a set, and it's like the professionalism. And I think that is really key. And so I really have no regrets for any parts I did. I'm just happy to act and get to do what I loved as a child.
Is there any parts that you'd love to play? Is there anything that you'd love
Well, it's funny, Richard. I haven't acted in almost I guess, almost 26 years or something. And I recently acted. My friends were like, you know, Oliver, you should act again. So I wrote this film, and I've been a filmmaker for all these years since college. And I wrote this piece called Celebrity Crush, which we just shot this summer. It was very low budget, but it was really interesting. And it's about this kid who's in an 80s movie, semi-autobiographical, who's trapped by this sociopathic fan in her like a makeshift dungeon in her house somewhere in Florida. And she hopes that he'll fall in love with her. You know, he'll fall in love with her. Yeah, so that's the movie we're cutting together right now. So it's kind of an interesting, it's sort of an alternate reality of what might have happened to me if I was a little different in this alternate reality world. So it's this horror piece. And that was really interesting because in some ways I played myself, and in some ways I was playing someone I really wasn't in this film. And it was really fun to act again after all these years. I was directing myself, which was I have to say it's difficult. It's really difficult because a good director really could guide you and take your performance up and take you down. And I don't care how great of a fine actor you are. Film is such a technical craft in terms of placement of camera, and that really does impact performance. You need someone to guide you. So for me, that was a really big challenge to direct myself along with everyone else.
And who would you say is your biggest inspiration in the acting world and doing films as well?
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, I don't know if I really had any great influences acting. I mean, I just love so many fine actors. I mean, everyone from Lawrence Olivier to Dustin Hoffman, you know, those are the level like Robert De Niro, people that really morph into the part. People are willing, I like actors who are willing to be challenged and really be daring and go off and leave their comfort zone and play different parts, like Danyl Day-Lewis. I mean, when you look at him and he played Lincoln, he looks like Abraham Lincoln. And every other part is so different. It kind of morphs into these parts. And I think so many actors aren't willing to step out of their comfort zone and do something that's really safe. So I admire anyone that's willing to do that. And I kind of did that on my own. I mean, I hadn't acted in almost 30 years, and now I'm acting in this film, you know? And I don't think you can be worried about failing. It's an experiment, and you just do it, and you do your very best.
What do you do? I mean, obviously, you're working hard all the time. What do you do to relax? What's fun time for you?
I don't relax at all, ever. No, I'm kidding. No, I love just hiking. I love cooking, too. I do a lot of cooking, and with my girlfriend, I'm the one who does all the cooking. So it's funny, because I like it. It's very meditative, and you're just there with your food, you're preparing it. I know and Mr. Spielberg, he made bread. That was one of the things he did. And Martin Scorsese was like, master filmmaker. I heard on Goodfellas, on that movie, he was making pasta for everyone on set. So I think cooking, it's creative, but it's also very relaxing because your mind has to leave whatever you're working on because you have to be very focused, So I love doing that, and I like jogging, and anything outdoors. And the weather's been so bad in California, when it's not 100 degrees, you can go outside and you can actually do something.
At least you don't have the horrible British weather.
Oh no, right now, I would, believe it or not, I would take that over what we're having right now in California.
Yeah, I do agree with that too, so yeah. Has anybody got any questions for Oliver at all?
Yes.
I was wondering, how much of the movie was actually filmed by Tobe? Was there some kind of...
Yeah, I mean, there's this ongoing controversy of like who directed the film. And, a lot of people understand that, Mr. Spielberg, he wrote the original draft of the script, and he also was the producer, and like any filmmaker, any writer, you want to have a lot of influence. But technically, Tobe was a director. He told me exactly what to do. He told me, I saw him tell the cinematographer where to place the camera. So he was the director. And I think if you work on any film with Steven, he's very hands-on, and you have a master filmmaker who's there to help you. And he's going to be there, and he's going to make suggestions and assist you. But at the same time, that film is, it's very different than any of Steven's other films. And I think it's a meld of all the best things that Tobe had to offer and Spielberg had to offer too. And they both have unique visions and talents. And at the end of the day, what's most important is how it kind of gelled. And I think, I really think it's a shame that there's like controversy. People just, like controversy. So I think that kind of, whether it's true or not, it really just, these things kind of feed on themselves, And it's a shame because, from my experience, Tobe was a director and he directed me.
Anybody else got any questions? No?
None at all?
So how are you finding it over Britain now in the UK? How are you finding it?
I love it here because people are, I come from LA, and LA is not the kindest city in the world. People are so polite, in the UK, and it's really refreshing to have people that are considerate and they think about other people other than themselves. And I love it. I've been coming here. I was with here with my parents when I was 6 months old too. So I love going to England, and you have so much history here. I mean, the U.S. is so young, and I live in a place that's really young. In California, if something is 30 years old, it's ancient, because we tear everything down. We build a new shopping center. We have no sense of the past, and I love history. I love everything about it, and it's great to just explore and be in a place that's ancient.
And what's the best thing about meeting fans when you come to the conventions?
It's like when I made the movie years ago, I always wondered, what are people thinking when they watch this movie? I had no idea, and the internet didn't exist, so there was no feedback. So now, years later, I always wondered what people were thinking. And now I'm finding out, like in different countries, like what their life experience was. They took someone on a date to that movie, or it was the scariest movie they've ever seen, or you learn about something, how it impacted their life. And that, for me, is very interesting. And the most powerful thing about cinema is how it affects people, what it makes them feel. And that's why I like making movies too. And I like hearing about the impact Poltergeist, had on their life and what it means to them, and also how they're sharing with their children. Because at that time, Poltergeist was a good movie, but it took a generation to grow up for it to be special. Because for them, for many people, they're my age now, and they're sharing it with their children. And I find that really meaningful.
Do you get a lot of fan mail? With the fan mail, what's the quirkiest thing that you've been sent?
I've been asked for locks of my hair. I some crazy things like that. Fingerprints. Can you give me fingerprint or something like that? Things like that. For the most part, it's really nothing crazy. People just want your autograph and want to talk to you about it. And I'm a fan of movies too. I have a lot of actors and filmmakers that I just love to get, their autograph, and appreciate what they did. And I like talking about with them. And that's the same thing. Like fans of the movie, they just want to know about the film because it had meaning to them, and they want to know the stories behind what happened. And when you love something so much, it's really interesting to find the dynamics of it and the machine behind making the movie, because filmmaking is such a crazy process, and even to make a bad film is so difficult. So when something works like Poltergeist, it's like as I say, lightning in a bottle. It's something kind of magical that happens. Especially not just making a film, but making a film that has impact within the culture at that time and can hit throughout the globe. I went to Russia, and and these people saw this movie during the Cold War, and I'm like, how did you see Poltergeist in the early 80s in Moscow? And they did. They saw this film, and they were telling me about how much they loved it. So it's so interesting to hear these stories.
Last time, anybody got any questions at all now? No? I think we'll leave it there, and just say thank you to Oliver for coming and speaking to you all. It's been absolutely wonderful.